Okay, so it's been quite a rough week. Finished my final exams for this semester, which I'm very happy about. These have been quite rough ones. But that is also the reason why this video is up a bit late. I hope you guys don't mind too much. The funny thing is that Dragon Link actually managed to win yesterday's LCS 10. You know, to some of you it might seem odd that I'm making a deck profile on it right now, but I thought I'd still share my ideas of the deck with you guys. The winner, or part of the winning team at least, was Gabriel Nets, you know, phenomenal player. So if you want to get an in-depth profile, I definitely recommend checking out his profile. He can probably give you some insight that I don't have. I also want to thank the Illusory Gentleman from Dueling Book. He was basically the guy that provided me with a starting point for the deck list and stuff. So my deck list is going to be very similar to his. With that being said, I didn't really enjoy Dragon Link in the previous formats, honestly. I always thought it was quite a linear combo strategy that, you know, just very boring, you know, not a lot of interaction and stuff. However, with the current Dragon Link strategy, it reminds me quite a bit of the Danger Thunder Dragon decks from back in the day, where you just had a lot of stuff to play through interruption of the opponent, but you could also abuse some very cool, crazy effects, like the Thunder Dragon cards back in the day. But, you know, now they're basically replaced by the Chaos Ruler Dragon, which is probably the coolest card of 2020. So in the next few minutes, I'll share, you know, my own deck list, my personal choices on the deck. Also, you know, talk a bit about some interactions of the deck and, you know, the usual jam, you know how it goes. So let's get in. All right, so I think that before going right into the deck list, I should give sort of an idea of what we try to accomplish with this deck usually. So it is quite different from the things we did in the past with this deck. Previously, we would try to end on the craziest board possible, and if we didn't succeed in that, we would probably lose because our opponent would OTK us with Adamancipator cards or Infernoble stuff. But this format is quite different because the opposing decks are probably not going to be as resilient to interruption as previously. It is okay to end on suboptimal boards with a hand trap or two, maybe. I think another thing to keep in mind is that nowadays, as if it were like 3 years ago, you know, in this format, 2 dragons don't equal combo. So it is not like, you know, Romulus gives you your full combo. It is more like you try to set up, you know, a board that is as good as possible, but it doesn't have to be the very craziest to interrupt the opponent. So with that in mind, let's go into the deck list. I'm quite excited for this. So for the hand traps, we play 9 hand traps, and I think that the amount of hand traps in this deck is undisputable. I think that 9 hand traps is pretty much correct because it is enough to, if you have to go second versus a combo deck, to draw them consistently, still stop them. 1 hand trap might be enough versus most combo decks this format, but it is also an amount where if you have to go first, you can play through a bit of interruption usually and still have like maybe 1 hand trap. So I think it is only disputable which hand traps you opt to play. I think that Ash and Gamma are pretty mandatory for this version of the deck. Ash Blossom, you know, probably the best hand trap overall. You know, it's good against everything. And Gamma in this deck specifically very, very strong because often it is life on your turn too. So you have Chaos Space, you have Safer that tributes for cost, you have Quick Launch. Oftentimes they will try to draw you after you Chaos Space. So there's a lot of windows and Gamma is quite crazy in this deck. So I think that Gamma is kind of mandatory. Sort of a disclaimer, I think that this is very much a DB rated oriented deck list where you expect to play a lot of rogue, so that's why I put Nibiru. But I think that if I were to play in the LCS, you know, yesterday, if I had to play in the LCS yesterday, I also wouldn't have played Nibiru. Probably would have exchanged this with maybe a Skullmeister, maybe with Ghost Bell, any of these cards, Crow, maybe anything that's like good against Eldritch, Drytron, and Virtual World. And then for the actual engine, we play 2 Tracer, 2 Rocket Synchron, 1 Recharger, and 1 Absol Router. So in the past, you obviously played 3 Tracer. It is your go-to rocket monster, I guess. For this version, Rocket Synchron is actually quite important because it's a level 1 tuner that revives a monster from the grave. So it is an extender, or you could almost say a starter with, you know, you need a bit of setup. And this deck very much plays around going into Chaos Ruler as quickly as possible, if you have the option to. So reviving a level 7 monster with this is quite crucial, very, very good. And that's why you play 2 of them. You also have to keep in mind that, you know, to Tracer, you pretty much have a lot of access. You have the Quick Launch, which gives direct access, you could say, but you also have Romulus, which now you play Dragon Ravine with to dump your Absol Router, which gets you to your Tracer. So you very rarely have problems getting to your Tracer. We play 1 Recharger because it's the best card in the deck, but the worst card to draw probably. Maybe not the best card in the deck, but you know, quite good, gets you there. A lot of follow-up, gives you perfect extension in the 3rd turn. Then we place 2 safe foot, and this might seem like a very weird amount to play, but the thing with the Dragon Link deck, and it always has been, is that a lot of extenders or starters in this deck fulfill the same role. So in this deck, you have quite a lot of cards that want to get you to the baby dragons, the Chaos Space, the Safert, you know, the baby dragons themselves, obviously, the Proto, maybe even a second Safert. Basically does the same job as the Chaos Space. Not quite as good because you have to give up your normal summon, but it still gets you there. But you definitely don't want to play 3 of this because you already play a lot of normal summons. You know, technically the Tracer, the Rocket Synchron, these are all normal summons. And obviously the Chamber Dragon Mage, which is honestly probably one of the best cards in this deck. You played in addition to the 2 Tiding, and I think you can sort of talk about these cards together because the Chamber Dragon Maid on normal or a special summon, it searches the Tiding from your deck. And the Tiding is a very interesting card in this format because this card is very, very good interruption that plays through Droplet, Dark Ruler no more, or plays around these cards rather, plays through, around the Bureau. It always gives you quite a nice disruption for the opponent's turn, while also being an extender that you can search, then discard off Dragon Ravine to maybe go for an extension play. You know, maybe if you're missing a dragon to go into like LP or Pisty, it's very, very crucial. So this card is very interesting in the deck, and upon normal summon, you can always search this. So this gives a very good interruption. I think that 3 Chamber Dragon Maid pretty much mandatory in this version of the deck. You don't really have a lot of high impact normal summon except for the Safert, and this gives you a very nice disruption. And 2 of the Tiding, because in the grind game, very often you will need a second one, and sometimes, you know, if you happen to draw one, you want to discard it off the Ravine to extend your plays, but then you still want to search one to have an interruption for the opponent's turn. So, believe this card is very, very good. Then the Baby Dragons, I mean, these are very mandatory. Levineer, one of the best cards in the deck. I wish I could play more of these, but there's just no reason to, because you can always search it with Proto, or you know, dump it with the Ravine, maybe banish a Safert, get it back to hands. It is one of the best cards, but you just don't want to play more of this than one Brotor. Also, same reason, one of the best cards, but you have a lot of access to it with the Dragon Ravine. You can put it in the grave. You can obviously summon it off LP, which is probably your go-to way to get it. Red MD, probably one of the worst extenders in this deck, I have to say, just because 2 dragons are not full combo anymore. So I'm actually thinking about cutting this card, but for now, you know, sometimes it comes up. Sometimes if you want to go for like Boral Sword OTK and you need an additional dragon on the board, this card can be quite nice. And then Noctavision is like one of these very random counts as well, but as my friend the Illusory Gentleman, you know, in his deck profile, he also said that this might seem like a random extender, but this also gives you an additional play with Absolute or Safert if you open both, you know, which is not a very likely scenario, but it can happen. You can, you know, normal the Safert, discard the Absolute and get the Noctavision to your hand, which is, again, a very good extender. And this card is just never really bad to draw either. Like, also protects your face down Tiding from not being targeted, so can't really be Cosmic Cyclone or anything if this is in the grave, which, you know, can happen because you can always mill it off the Chaos Ruler, or, you know, search it like I said and then have it in the grave. For the spells, this is also very standard, I would say. Boot Sector, you know, Ravine, great extenders, Chaos Space. What can you say about this card? It's just very absurd, especially with Gamma. Quick Launch, free extender, and Legacy God Dragon is obviously the best extender of the deck because it gives you basically 2 extenders for 1 because you can move the LP to a different location. This card is very, very insane. If you could play more of this, I think I would probably play 6 of this if possible. And then 2 Tiding, I think we already talked about this. Then for the extra deck, Savage, Chaos Ruler. These are your level 8 synchros, and oftentimes you would rather go for the Chaos Ruler than the Savage because I feel like with the current format, you'd rather have a very, very solid follow-up than just a plain out straight negation, because in this format, I believe that negations, they're not really as good. You know, Drytron can easily play through these hard negations, Virtual World, also sort of if they just happen to draw a second name. So often like these bounces that you have off Seal or Tiding, they're just going to be a lot more impactful than these hard negations. Chaos Ruler, like I said, this is the most busted card of the deck, probably the coolest card released in 2020, as I said. And then you play the Heartrend Dragon Archer Abyss, and this is very, very cool, and something I very much like is when you have these weird ways. Like previously you would always summon this off the Agapane, I remember like 2 years ago, but now you actually can hard summon this if you make the Chaos Ruler. You know, you use it for like Romulus, and then you can summon it back. And with the Rocket Synchron, it is a level 1 tuner. This is a Dark Synchro Dragon, level 8, so makes level 9, makes a Hot Red Dragon Archer Abyss. And Actually, this comes up quite often, and this has a crazy effect where if you deal battle damage to your opponent, you can special summon a tuner back from your grave, so extend your plays again. And yeah, just really like this interaction. I'm a big fan of this. 2 Striker Dragon, and arguably you would need a third one, maybe. But I need the space for other cards, I feel like, personally. And we can talk a bit about this when we finish with the extra deck, but I think that if you manage your resources well with this deck, you don't really need a third one, but it is a nice luxury to have. Like, I would feel more comfortable playing the deck sometimes with a third one, so, you know, if you build the deck, maybe think about cutting another extra deck spot for a third Striker Dragon. I think there's definitely an argument to be made for a third one, and as far as I know, Gabriel Nats, he also played a third one, so that's quite interesting to note. LP Pissy, nothing to say about that. Romulus, Searches the Dragon Ravine. Needle Fiber, you don't really go into it too much, but sometimes you need it for an additional body, and sometimes if you want to go for Boral Sword, maybe. It also comes up, but I rarely make this card, honestly. I wouldn't even say that I, make this card every match or so. So 2 Seal is very important, because if you get Nibiru, you want to be able to make a second one, and also sometimes turn 3, turn 5, you want to make a second one to interrupt your opponent again, because like I said, very often this deck doesn't really go for the largest board or anything. You just try to, make a spheres, bounce a card of your opponent, hope that it interrupts him enough so you can summon out an extension play, and then in the following turn, do the same thing again, make a spheres, maybe make a savage to that in addition, and sort of outgrind your opponent, which is very funny that Dragon Link never used to do this kind of stuff, but now the deck, it's changed so much that it can do that. If you have full combo, you can even go for Saryuja, which, post-siding, this can be very good. Don't look too much at my side deck yet. This is very random, but I'll get to that in a second. I think that Saryuja, it is a very good card. I don't know if it's mandatory. I wouldn't really say so, but sometimes post-siding, if you can draw into the right hand traps, it is very good. And it makes it also that your Savage gets a Link 4 negation, which, sometimes is quite relevant because the games can go for quite some turns. So having 4 negations instead of like 2 or maybe even 1, it's quite good. Appaloosa, this is a very new edition. I haven't really tried out this card, but I felt in testing, sometimes you just want a second Link 4 and something to combat the Nibiru, because oftentimes they can just wait until you summon the Savage and then drop the Nibiru, which is kind of unfortunate because it makes OTKing a lot harder. So I think Appaloosa is fine. The only problem is maybe that it's a wind attribute, so post using Rocket Tracer, you can't really go into it. And Boral Sword Dragon, standard OTK machine. And then the Xenophon is something interesting, because if you make the Chaos Ruler and you revive it, you can use it with a Legionnaire or a Savage Dragon to go into the Xenophon, use its effect, and then you can revive the Chaos Ruler again in the next turn. And this is quite good versus Drytron, obviously. It's basically an auto-win. More than an auto win, but it's quite good. And then also okay versus Virtual World, I would say. Shuts down the Neon, shuts down the Lado, so that's fine. I won't really go over the side deck. This is just very random DB stuff. I play Ghost Ogre because I hate Numeron cards. Droplet, versus Dragoon or anything is kind of pain in the ass to deal with. A Dark Ruler if I play, the Mirror Match or anything similar. And then these cards just versus mine, because I just happen to play a lot of mine. This card is interesting though. The Korkimaru Drago is to combat the Drytron strategy. I think if you go first and you put up the Heretic Seal, you can summon this you can summon this from your deck. Neither player can special summon light or dark monsters. If you can protect this card, can be an auto win button. So this is very interesting. That wraps up the deck list. Let's talk a bit about the deck and some interactions. So when it comes to interaction, I don't really think that the deck has a lot of like very, very in-depth, very cool interactions, like Shadol maybe, where the Meltdown, you can totally abuse it and stuff. But still, what I find very cool that nowadays you don't really go into Romulus anymore that much. You would rather go for Spheres all the time. So you have a better protection versus Nibiru. So if they Nibiru you, sometimes you can even extend better than you previously could. I also believe that you have to keep in mind that Chaos Ruler is basically always the card that you want to go for in this deck list, if possible, if you have enough resources for that. And that getting access to Rocket Synchron to make the Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss is quite crucial for this deck. Always keep in mind that you can search the Dragon Maid Trap, use Dragon Ravine to discard it to then search, a Rocket Monster for your Absa Router and still be able to extend with your trap in the graveyard. I think that is quite good to know. But other than that, I would say let's get into the discussion. I guess what I'm all in all trying to say is that the Dragonlink deck has changed quite significantly over the last format. It's become this sort of very grindy, interactive deck, which is kind of interesting, very cool. And it's just generally a lot of fun. So if you want to give it a try, definitely do it. But I would also love to hear your opinion on the deck. Not only my list, but the deck in general in this format. Do you think it's like a viable option? I mean, obviously it is probably if the LCS winner played it. But what do you think about the deck? Like, do you like it more than previously? Do you think it has changed for the better or for the worse or whatever? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And with that being said, I hope you guys loved it and see you